How well are you coping with all the press attention?
Well, as you can see, you can tell.
Are you bearing up with it quite well, though? Because it must be quite a strain with all of us after you.
Well, it is, naturally.
You're coping with it all right, though? You seem to be doing very well.
Well, I'm still around.
What a picture of hope and happiness and love. She had it all. I knew her. I stood beside her. I could feel the warmth which she radiated because she was truly inspirational and unique. But someone else occupied that space in between, and I learned to serve two royal mistresses. One, Princess of Wales, and the other, Mrs. Parker Bowles.
I hope you can find it in your hearts to understand and to give me the time and space that has been lacking in recent years.
I couldn't believe it. It was too raw. For most people, that was the final straw. That was the straw that broke the back of the House of Windsor. In the summer of 1980, the Queen told me that a young girl was coming to stay for the weekend. Will you meet her at the front door and show her a room? Of course, Your Majesty. So I'm standing in the front hallway of Balmoral Castle on the black and white tiles, waiting for this car to arrive. And out of the car comes a shy young girl that nobody knew who she was. She had one little suitcase in the back. Is that all you've brought with you? You're here for the weekend. You have to go to hunting, shooting, you have to go to the Gillies Ball, tea parties, lunch parties, and that's all you have. She says, will it do? I said, I think we'd better take you to her room and find out. I showed her to her room. Will you stay for a while and have a chat with me? I'm completely out of my depth, she said. So I stayed. What time do you go down for tea? 4 o'clock. You go down to the small drawing room. The Queen will pour you a cup of tea. I don't like tea. I'll make sure she has coffee there waiting for you. Then what happens? I said, when tea's cleared, you go into the drawing room, and then the Queen will pour you a gin and tonic. I don't drink. I'll make sure there's a glass of water there for you. Then what happens? Then the Queen plays cards on her card table. Do you play bridge? Yes. Then make sure you're sat at the card table to play bridge with the Queen. That's a good way to get to know Her Majesty. Then the Queen will take the dogs into the garden. Maybe you could suggest you went for a walk with her. Also a good time to get Her Majesty's ear. That's what you want to do. This young girl was fascinated by this routine of royal households. And as I closed the door that day, I noticed the name on the door, Lady Diana Spencer.
It's almost impossible to describe to a stranger or someone who's never met Princess Diana what she was really like. What I usually say is she was as beautiful inside as she was out. But to meet her was something special. She lit up a room. She stopped traffic. And when she entered into a room, everything stopped and all eyes were on her. I've never met another human being who had that aura, who had that charisma, the same as Princess Diana. The princess changed enormously from the time I met her, aged 18, to the very end. I was there from the beginning to the very end. And I can tell you, in the beginning, she was a shy, naive, quiet girl who knew nothing about the world. She transformed. She had to. She had to survive. She was thrown in at the deep end and told to swim, and she learned quickly.
My years at Westheath were certainly very happy ones indeed. I made many friends who I often see, and in spite of what Miss Rudge and my other teachers may have thought at the time, I did actually learn something. so you would never have known by my O-level results.
Do you find it a very daunting experience that yesterday you were a nanny looking after children, now you're about to marry the Prince of Wales, and one day you would, in all likelihood, be Queen? It's a tremendous change for someone, if I may say, of 19 to make all of a sudden, the transition.
It is, but I've had a small run-up to it all in the last 6 months. And next to Prince Charles and I can't go wrong. He's there with me.
Did you find it a very hard decision, Lady Diana?
I had a long time to think about it, because I knew the pressure was on both of us. And well, it wasn't a difficult decision in the end. It's what I wanted. It's what I want. And I
haven't seen the ring. May I have a look at you?
This wonderful sapphire and diamond.
When were you given that? Just last night? Or?
No, Sunday.
But not wearing it?
No.
Yesterday?
No, pretty hidden.
What about the proposal, Your Royal Highness? How did that come about?
Well, I asked Diana before she went to Australia, 2-3 days before, because I thought it'd be a good idea that, apart from anything else, if she went to Australia, she could then think about it, and if she didn't like the idea, she could say she didn't, or if she did, she could say that. But in fact, you actually said
yes, quite
yes,
promptly.
Before you went to Australia?
Yes.
But they've got to sit on it for 3 weeks.
Must have been an agonising 3 weeks. Did you speak at all? I mean, the phone lines must have been pretty busy between here and Australia.
Yes, we tried, but it was quite difficult because I think there was a certain amount of press interest there. Although they never actually found you, did they?
No.
But I rang up on one occasion and I said, can I speak? And they said, no, we're not taking any calls. So I said, well, is the Prince of Wales speaking? How do I know it's the Prince of Wales? Came back to reply. And she said, well, you don't, but I am, in a rage.
The most watched event in human history was her wedding day. St. Paul's Cathedral was the setting.
Very well, thank you. I'd just like to say a word. May I say a word?
Please do.
Yes. The Spencers have, through the centuries, fought for their king and country. Today, Diana is vowing to help her country for the rest of her life. She will be following in the tradition of her ancestors, and she will have at her side the man she loves.
And the diamonds of the Spencer family tiara were glinting in the sunshine, and she was racing towards me. Just me and her in one corridor. She was like a galleon in full sail. What a picture of hope and happiness and love. She didn't eat a morsel. And she said to me later, I couldn't eat a thing, Paul. My stomach was in knots. I was just totally wound up by the day, by the excitement, by the spectacle. She says, but you know, the most wonderful thing was walking down the aisle of St. Paul's Cathedral with my father. She says, but did you ever look at the footage of that? I said, I've seen it many times. She says, next time you look at it, watch me. She says, can't you see me looking from side to side? Can you see me doing that? Do you know what I'm doing? I'm looking for her. I'm looking for Camilla. And she was there. She was even at my wedding.
Here is the stuff of which fairy tales are made. The prince and princess on their wedding day.
The princess was brimming with hope and love for the future. She fell in love with her prince. And there they were, a golden couple. He'd also courted her older sister, of course. Sarah had been a suitor. And on Diana's wedding day, her sister, Sarah, turned to her and said, I thought all this was going to be mine one day, and now it's yours. There was sibling rivalry in the Spencer household. Diana wasn't meant to achieve. The fact that Diana became Princess of Wales, probably future Queen of England, was beyond the Spencer family to comprehend. It wasn't for her to achieve. The brother should have achieved. It's his estate, not Diana's. So there was always some jealousy coming from the Spencers.
Madam, how are you enjoying married life?
Highly recommend.
How do you like Balmoral as a place?
Lovely.
Have you cooked a breakfast yet?
I remember very well Prince William being born because on that particular day, the Queen rang her bell and said, "Send for a bottle of champagne, my favorite, Krug. We'll all have a glass of champagne to toast the birth of my grandson, William." So I stood in the Queen's sitting room at Buckingham Palace with a glass of champagne, toasting William's health.
Does Prince William have a favourite toy?
Jamie, he loves his koala bear he's got. But he hasn't got anything particular. He just likes something with a bit of noise. He got a plastic whale that throws things out the top, little balls.
During this time, of course, Diana was visiting Balmoral and Sandringham and all the royal residences and actually got to know me very well. I remember her showing me the honeymoon pictures. I remember her telling me that she was carrying another baby, which was Harry. She was at Balmoral wearing a very beautiful tartan evening dress for the Gillies ball, and she pushed me into the dining room. "Put your hand on my tummy," she said. I said, "No, I can't do that. You're a royal princess." She took my hand and placed it on her tummy. "Can you feel that?" she said. And a little kick. She says, "It's a boy." "You shouldn't have told me that. That is a state secret. Now, if it gets out, you'll blame me." She says, "But I'm trusting you with that secret." It was the first time she'd actually trusted me.
How old this is? Granny was christened in this. Great-granny. And I was. Look, I was christened in this. Looks remarkably well, despite it.
Zara? Zara?
She began trusting me with more. "I need somebody like you, Paul. I need someone like you for the future. I've got no one I can trust in. Would you think about leaving the Queen and come and work for me?" Now, I had the best job in the world. I wasn't about to leave the Queen of England. "If you come and live with me, I'll give you a beautiful cottage in the countryside at Highgrove, and you and your 2 children and your wife can grow with my family and William and Harry, and we'll be just one big happy family. Think about it. Life would be much better for you. The standard would be higher." I thought about it and thought it was the right future for my family. When you think about a royal upbringing, you think about nannies and nurseries and things like that. It was different for Diana because she was very hands-on. From the first day, she was changing nappies, she was giving feeds, she was always there.
The whole family arrived from Kensington Palace. They were greeted by Jane Miners, who runs the £200 a term kindergarten. Prince William is an old hand. He went to this school for a year. The Princess of Wales made sure young Harry was centre stage for the well-practised wave. Then Then elder brother tried to take charge, but Harry wasn't having any of it. Clutching onto his Thomas the Tank Engine satchel, he followed his brother down the steps into school.
Diana and I had a nickname for Harry. William was always Wombat, and Harry was GKH. We called him Good King Harry. Because one day, William said, "I don't want to be king." And Harry piped up, "I'll be king then in your place." And Diana said, "He'd make a great king, wouldn't he?" Living and working with the Queen was far more easy than living with Diana. With the Queen, we always knew that her life ran with routines and protocols and timetables. We knew that breakfast would be 9 o'clock, lunch would be 1 o'clock, tea would be 5 o'clock, and dinner would be 8:15. It was the same every day. It's Groundhog Day at Buckingham Palace. Nothing changes at Buckingham Palace. Everything runs smoothly. With Diana, anything could happen. No routine, no timetables, nothing. We might skip lunch, we might be shopping, we could be doing anything during the day. So life was more exciting with Diana. But the difference between the two worlds was I always knew where I was with the Queen. I always knew where the line was in the sand. I knew when not to cross that line, and I knew to stay and bow. I was a servant, but also a friend and confidant to the Queen, but in a different way. With Diana, it was, have a cup of tea with me, have a cup of coffee. Don't just stand there. I used to stand every morning waiting for the princess to come through from her dressing room. And every morning, standing there with a half a grapefruit and a cup of black coffee, I'd bow and say, "Good morning, Your Royal Highness." "For goodness sake," she'd say, "when are you going to stop doing that? It's just me and you in the room. Sit down and have a cup of coffee with me and tell me what's been going on."
Sorry, I didn't see you there.
I wish you
Sorry.
that, darling. Wish
You're
you
hugging the
that.
lamb.
I'm happy. I'm having it all this side. You look
So are you on your way shopping?
Yeah.
I see the sun out.
The formal princess on the world stage did everything as she should, to perfection. But behind closed doors, she was naughty. She was a naughty little girl. She loved to have fun. She loved to giggle. She loved to play practical jokes.
At that time, everybody was saying, "Good luck," and "I hope everything goes well," and "How lucky you are to be engaged to such a lovely lady." And my goodness, I was lucky enough to marry her. And we had many, many messages. It's amazing what ladies do when your back's turned.
The most important people in Diana's life were her two boys. She called them "my boys." She'd have done anything for those boys. When the boys went to boarding school, things changed. And Diana realized that the boys were royal princes and they needed a royal upbringing, so she gave them up. And they often spent their holidays with their grandmother and grandfather at Balmoral or Sandringham. Years later, she said to me, "Well, yes, I kissed a frog. I found a toad." That was my story. But she did fall in love with him, and those two boys are born out of love.
I saw correspondence between them. I saw correspondence from the princess to the Queen, which said how happy she was and how she loved to be a wife and how much she would support Charles in his future career. And so the first 5 years of the princess's marriage, she felt that she could make it work.
Now, if you watch that piece of footage when Prince Charles is asked, "Are you in love, sir?"
And I suppose in love.
Of course. Whatever in love means.
And she looks at him as if to say, "What are you talking about? Don't you know what love is?" That was the problem from the beginning. Charles didn't really know what love was. He never really wanted a lover. He wanted a mother.
I haven't yet worked out a method of splitting my wife in half. She can do both sides.
In the early days, Diana's light was small, but he began to shine brighter and brighter and brighter. And it was a sort of a Star is Born situation. Prince Charles would say to her, "Well, I married you, I made you a princess. You weren't born royal. This is a man who's been born to be king. This is a man who's been treated from the very beginning as a god. Suddenly being eclipsed by this woman, he wasn't very happy."
Your wife's always loved you.
Prince Charles wasn't always kind to the princess. In fact, sometimes he was quite cruel. I remember one occasion she came downstairs wearing a beautiful black and white Catherine Walker gown. And she said, "Charles, I've had it made specially. Do you like it? You look like you belong to the mafia," he said, which cut her down to her knees. And then on one occasion, she came down in a tartan dress and said, "Do you like this one? Where you look like a British Caledonian stewardess." It was always undermining, just before an engagement began, so that she would lose her confidence. So it was mental cruelty in a way. I never saw any physical violence. I saw tables being upset. I saw crockery being thrown across the room, but I never saw any physical violence. Now, the royal marriage was falling apart, and I was Diana's man, placed strategically at Highgrove, placed there to keep the house in order, but also to be there for Diana, to be there as a rock, she later called me. It was difficult for me to tread the path between Prince Charles and Princess Diana. Now, Diana arrived every weekend with the boys on Friday afternoon and left every Sunday. But someone else occupied that space in between. And I learned to serve two royal mistresses. One, Princess of Wales, and the other, Mrs. Parker Bowles. It was impossible to do this balancing act between the prince and the princess, the prince during the week and the princess at the weekend, and then have someone else pop in to this ménage à trois. It was incredibly difficult because the princess would ring me up from London and say, "Where's Prince Charles tonight, Paul? Where's the Prince of Wales?" "He's out for dinner, Your Royal Highness." "Where is he?" "I've no idea." "Of course you know where he is. You always know where he is." "Who's he got for dinner tomorrow night? I hear he's got a dinner party. Who's coming?" "Don't ask me. Please ask him." One day I told the princess the prince was out. The prince found out. I'd been talking to the princess, thinking I'd been gossiping to her. He rang his bell. I went into the library, stood there. "Your Royal Highness, I hear you've had a conversation with my wife. Why are you talking about me being out last night?" "I'm sorry, Your Royal Highness, but you were." "Well, can't you lie?" you're asking me to lie about you not being in residence. Yes, why did you do it? You're bloody told. And he picked up a book and started to stamp on the spot like a petulant child, and he hurled this book at me across the room. I dodged and missed it, and I thought, I think my time's up. I think it's time I got out. Diana rescued me. She took me back with her.
Mrs. Barker-Bowles is a great friend of mine. I have a large number of friends I'm terribly lucky to have.
The Prince of Wales had just been on TV to admit adultery with Camilla Parker-Bowles, and the princess that evening was due to go out to the Serpentine Gallery to see her old friend Lord Palumbo.
When marriages break down, awful and miserable as that is, that so often that it is your friends who are the most important.
I can't go. I'm not going. I'm not going. It'll be too humiliating. The whole world now knows that Charles has been having an affair. He's admitted it. You are going, I said. I've got nothing to wear. Yes, you have got something to wear. I went up to her wardrobe room and picked out a Christina Strombolian dress with a fishtail. This is what you're going to wear, I said. I can't fit into it. Yes, you can. Put it on. So she slipped it on. Now, to complement that, I think we should have the pearl choker and the sapphire. That's all you need. High heels and those jewels. Right, she put them on and she looked $1 million. Remember, when you go out there, I said, you stride, you hold your head high, you smile, you engage, firm handshake. Say to yourself, I am Diana, Princess of Wales, and I am here to stay. I am the mother of the future King of England. Say it to yourself. The only secret Diana ever kept from me was the Martin Bashir interview for Panorama. Now, I'd known Martin Bashir for a long time, and he was one of the men that I used to bring into the palace under a blanket because he didn't want to be seen by anyone. He was never a lover of the princesses. He was just a work associate. He persuaded the princess that she had to have a voice. She needed to tell her story, and what better a vehicle than Panorama? I was sent home on a Sunday afternoon. Strange, I thought. Why would she be sending me home? Go and spend some time with your family. I'm doing nothing this afternoon. Don't worry about me. The minute I'd left the palace, in through the back door comes Martin Bashir and his camera crew. And they set up the Prince of Wales sitting room, which she used for that interview.
At the age of 19, you always think you're prepared for everything, and you think you have the knowledge of what's coming ahead. But although I was daunted at the prospect at the time, I felt I had the support of my husband-to-be.
I had no idea that was being done. The next morning I came to work, I noticed all the furniture had been moved. Why have you moved the furniture? It's not in the same place. I had a dance class. I had to move the furniture out of the way just so that we could exercise. Strange. Very strange. She avoided me for the next 2 days, never spoke to me. How strange, I thought. She's hiding something. And then she told me that she'd made a recording with Martin Bashir for Panorama. What have you said? Well, I just put the record straight, she said. We didn't know what she said until we saw it.
Well, there were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded.
31 million people stopped in their tracks on that Monday night and couldn't believe what they were seeing. The Princess of Wales bearing her heart on national television. We couldn't take our eyes away from it. We couldn't believe what we were hearing. There are 3 people in my marriage. My husband isn't fit for the top job. I think it would bring him limitations. She was honest, open, and frank. Did you love James Hewitt?
Yes, it did. Yes.
Were you unfaithful?
Yes, I adored him. Yes, I was in love with him. But I was very let down.
It was all there. I couldn't believe it. It was too raw for most people, and an embarrassment for the royal family. That was the final straw. That was the straw that broke the back of the House of Windsor.
James Hewitt came along at a time when the princess was first looking for someone to love.
I have no comment. No comment, I'm afraid.
Will you be prepared to make a comment to us later on in the day?
No, I have no comment.
He just happened to be there. He just happened to be a dashing cavalry officer. He just happened to push all the right buttons. I have to tell you, he was there after Prince Harry was born, not before Prince Harry was born, because there's a great myth in the world that people think that Harry is James Hewitt's son. That's impossible. She didn't know James Hewitt at that time. You have to look at the chronological order of the way things happened.
Good. I'm going off here. That's enough. Thanks. Thank you.
So Harry was born. Prince Charles had told her, "I don't love you. I only married you to have children." She then begins to look for someone to love. And James Hewitt was there. I was the one she trusted. No one else knew of this relationship. And I would ferry him to and from Highgrove, from Kemble railway station, in the back of my car, and take him back to the train station when they'd had tea or he'd spent the night. But this was a real big secret. The other big secret I was keeping was, of course, Prince Charles was seeing Camilla Parker Bowles. No one knew. The world didn't know at that stage.
The Prince of Wales and Camilla Parker Bowles seen together in public quite clearly, coming down the steps of the Ritz after the party for the 50th birthday party for Camilla's sister. No secret about their relationship now, none possible at all. The photograph that people have waited so long, the picture that people have waited so long to see. Quite brief, really, out of the doors, down the steps, into the car, and driving away. An absolute cascade of flashbulbs, only a few seconds, but the picture, the scene that says so much.
But even still, the princess tried to make her marriage work, and she never actually wanted a divorce. She said, "I'll have a separation, but I don't want to be divorced. For the children's sake, I want us to remain a family unit, to bring them up as parents." But the Queen wouldn't hear of it. The Queen wrote to Princess Diana and said, "For the sake of the monarchy and the country and the church, we think it's best if you and Charles divorce." The princess was furious. She says, "This is my marriage, not theirs. It's nothing to do with the church. It's to do with me and Charles and the children." In the very end, she had to succumb to a divorce.
Your patron has never been happier to see you. Whatever uncertainties the last few weeks may have brought, I want you to be certain of this: our work together will continue unchanged, especially now as Christmas brings its own painful stresses to so many people in need. The sick, the old, the handicapped and the homeless, the lonely, the confused, and the simply unloved, who are needing your help more than ever.
I was with her for 10 years in total. and began traveling with her around the world, to Angola, to Bosnia, to far-reach countries, searching out people who were less fortunate than we were, people who needed their plight heightened by an incredible icon of our times.
I think we ought to retire gracefully.
Good morning, ma'am. Were you surprised at the political furore that developed as a result of your visit to Angola?
I saw it merely as a distraction because I'm not a political figure. I am a humanitarian figure, and always have been and always will be.
We will concentrate, of course, on dissemination.
It's been a very intensive 4 days. I have seen a great deal. I've seen the people affected by landmines. I've seen the landmines themselves. Angola is an example of what the Red Cross can achieve around the world, given the sort of cooperation that we have seen that exists between the Red Cross and the NGOs and the Angolan authorities.
Despite the controversy at home, the princess's campaigning continued today in what's believed to be the most heavily mined town in the world. Already briefed about the political row she'd stepped into, she seemed taken aback by the description of her as a loose cannon.
Well, Jenny, I'm only trying to highlight a problem that's going on all around the world. That's all.
It's been said, though, that you're aligning yourself with Labour policy. Do you think that's wise?
Labour? I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what
We have really to keep the programme going.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I remember going to a hospital in Bosnia where a little girl had been blown up by a landmine. She'd been into the field to retrieve her brother's football, and she'd been blown up and lost her legs. She was critically ill, and the princess sat by her bed and held her hand, and this little girl couldn't understand English. And the princess left. The little girl opened her eyes and said to the nurse in her language, "I've just seen an angel." That one moment of humanity changed my life, and I saw the princess in a different light. I saw her as beautiful inside as she was on the outside.
I wanted just to be with you, to show you that you are not forgotten.
Diana did things differently. There was a memo came from Buckingham Palace. "Diana, when you're in public, please wear a hat and please wear gloves, because you're touching the public and you might catch something." And I'm not too sure about you touching those people with HIV and AIDS. Are you sure you're safe? We lived in a world of ignorance. We lived in a world where people were not educated. They didn't know. The princess introduced me to the first person dying with HIV and AIDS. I didn't know anything about it until she showed me that world. She would sit and hold people's hands and counsel them. So life with Diana was very different. Life with Diana was 24/7. My wife said, "There are 3 people in my marriage too," because Diana is always there. She used to say, "She's your baby." I said, "Yes, she's my baby. She needs me. She needs me to be there." My wife had 2 children. The princess had no one. Her children were away at boarding school. She had no husband. Occasionally, she had a male companion, but they came and they went. I was responsible for that too. I was a go-between. I was the one that went out with my car, brought people back to Kensington Palace in the back seat of my car underneath a blanket, just to give the princess some love. All she was ever looking for was to be loved. She used to say to me, all I ever want, Paul, is a man to put their arms around me and say, I love you. That's not too much to ask, is it? And that's what she was searching for. Towards the end of her life, of course, she found her soulmate. Her soulmate was Hasnat Khan, the heart surgeon.
I remember the day the princess met Hasnat Khan. She came back from the hospital, having visited children on the ward, and she said the most astonishing things happened to me today. As we sat down, she told me about this meeting. She said I was going up in the elevator and somebody put their foot into the elevator door as it was closing, and it opened again. And there he was. This gorgeous man was staring at me. Well, who wouldn't stare at Princess Diana? Surrounded by a gaggle of students, Hasnat was on his rounds around the hospital. And there he was, face to face with the princess for the first time. And she said, I knew I would have a relationship with him. Our chemistry was so strong that I knew. Of course, their relationship was nearly 2 years in the making. 2 years, no one knew about him. Again, I was the go-between. I would bring him into the palace. I'd ask chef to cook dinner for 2. I'd wait dinner for 2. I'd make sure they were comfortable before I went home. And in the morning, I'd take him back in the boot of my car to the hospital. So the police never saw him. The chefs never saw him. The maids never saw him. And no one saw him, just me.
I hope you can find it in your hearts to understand and to give me the time and space that has been lacking in recent years.
Hasnat Khan had been the princess's companion for over 2 years. Nobody knew about Hasnat Khan. That was not played out on the world stage. Whereas, after they'd broken up, the princess was invited to the south of France by the Mohammed Al-Fayeds. She met Dodi Al-Fayed. Did you know that the romance of the princess and Dodi Al-Fayed was 30 days from beginning to end? It only lasted 30 days. I spoke to her regularly when she was away. Have you seen Hasnat? I said, yes, I went for a drink with him last night. What does he think of me being here in the south of France with Dodi Al-Fayed? Well, he's not too pleased. Has he seen the pictures in the papers? Yes, he has, because you know his routine. You know every morning he goes to the corner shop and sees the press. You know that. And I know that's what you're doing. You're manipulating the world's media by having these pictures taken to show Hasnat who you're with. It's sort of a... Are you jealous? Do you mind? Do you care? Are you bothered? That's what Diana was saying to Hasnat Khan through those pictures in the world's media. And of course, Hasnat was bothered. And I didn't find out until recently that he called her the day before she died on her mobile phone. He called her to try and patch up their relationship. Had she returned to London, I truly believe the romance between Hasnat Khan and the princess would have been rekindled. It was too strong. It was too deep. They were true soulmates. I said to the princess, when are you coming home? I'm coming home on Sunday, Paul. I'm just bored. I'm on this boat. It's freezing cold downstairs. It's boiling hot on deck. I'm sending these pictures out and nobody's coming back to me. I'm having no communication. I need to come home. But the only way home is on the Harrods jet. The only way I can get home is via Paris, because Dodi has to go to Paris to do some business for his father. How is he with you? Oh, he's very spoiling. He's very generous, the princess said. He's given me a necklace, some earrings. He's given me a watch. I said, you know what's coming next, don't you? Do you think so? Oh, yes. He's going to give you a ring. But remember, when he gives it to you, put it on the fourth finger of your right hand. Yes, that's the thing to do. I'll do that. You always know what to do. I stared for a while in disbelief, and I took her hand and said, "Wake up." And nothing happened.
I spoke to the princess the day before and made all her plans for her return. Then she rang me from the hotel in Paris and said, "Oh, I'm going to be a little late, so will you arrange everything a day later?" I said, "Yeah, sure, it's no problem."
10 months before that, the princess had written me a letter. And in that letter, she said, in her own handwriting, on her own stationery, her words were, "The next few months are the most difficult in my life. I fear that my husband is planning an accident in my car, head injuries, in order that he can remarry." Now, when you read those words, a prophecy the princess made 10 months before she died, it's rather eerie.
I feel like everyone else in this country today, utterly devastated. Our thoughts and prayers are with Princess Diana's family, in particular her two sons, the two boys. Our hearts go out to them.
First, we'd heard the princess had had head injuries and broken her arm. And then at 2 o'clock in the morning, we heard that the injuries were more serious than they first thought. And it wasn't until about 3 o'clock that they told us that the accident had been fatal. And during this time, my thoughts were, I must get to Paris, because if she's incapacitated in any way, she'll need me to support her, to take care of her, to keep her safe. And when I heard that the accident was fatal, I thought there's even more reason for me to be there. I do need to keep her safe. I need to protect her. I need to look after her. So early Sunday morning, I arrived in Paris and was taken straight by the British ambassador, taken to the hospital. And I approached the bed. It was a hospital bed, and the princess was covered in a white sheet. Her head and her feet were visible, and her hands were on top of the sheet. And I approached the bed, and I stared for a while in disbelief, and I watched the fan whirring on the side of the bed table. A fan was moving on the bedside table, and as it moved the princess's hair, and I could see her eyelashes moving. And I took her hand and said, "Wake up. You're asleep, aren't you? Wake up." And nothing happened. She was soft and warm. Not dead at all. It was quite a while before I realized that she was actually not with us. and remembered what she told me about death. She said, at that moment when you pass, your spirit lifts from the body and you hang around for a while and watch. So I said, you're here, aren't you? You're here. You're watching me. You're watching what I'm doing. And I'll try and do it the way you'd want me to do it. So I stayed with her. It must have been very difficult for the Prince of Wales to come to Paris because he was estranged from his wife, divorced from his wife, didn't particularly like her. He was there, of course, for the boys, as their father. But he was out of sorts, didn't know how to behave. This was new territory. His ex-wife was dead.
We are today a nation in Britain in a state of shock, in mourning, in grief that is so deeply painful for us. You know how difficult things were for her from time to time. I'm sure we can only guess at, but the people everywhere, not just here in Britain, everywhere, they kept faith with Princess Diana. They liked her, they loved her. They regarded her as one of the people. She was the people's princess. And that's how she will stay, how she will remain in our hearts and in our memories forever.
And we brought her home, and I came home, and I had a little walk in the gardens of Kensington Palace and saw people beginning to bring their floral tributes. Maybe just 20 or 30 of them, maybe 100. Nothing like what would happen that week. At the time of Diana's death, of course, there was great animosity towards the royal family. They felt the Queen wasn't doing enough. She was keeping her grandchildren safe at Balmoral, but she wasn't appearing for her people in London. The people thought she'd lost touch with the nation. I remember watching that broadcast, unprecedented broadcast of the Queen from Buckingham Palace live, the only live broadcast she's ever made. And she spoke from the heart.
First, I want to pay tribute to Diana myself. She was an exceptional and gifted human being. In good times and bad, she never lost her capacity to smile and laugh, nor to inspire others with her warmth and kindness. I admired and respected her for her energy and commitment to others, and especially for her devotion to her two boys. This week at Balmoral, we have all been trying to help William and Harry come to terms with the devastating loss that they and the rest of us have suffered. No one who knew Diana will ever forget her. Millions of others who never met her, but felt they knew her, will remember her. I, for one, believe there are lessons to be drawn from her life and from the extraordinary and moving reaction to her death. I share in your determination to cherish her memory.
And I remember pulling up a chair and leaning on her coffin, covered in the Royal Standard, and talking to her all night long. And then morning came, and I could hear the crunch of the wheels of the gun carriage on the gravel outside, and I knew they'd come to take her away. I didn't want to let go. And I watched them load the coffin onto the gun carriage. And I stood in the doorway. And as they gave the order to pull away, I remember bowing. I remember bowing for the last time. And saying, "Goodbye, Your Royal Highness." Because that's in my eyes, she was always Your Royal Highness.
Charles.
Shut up.
Charles.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Howard. Sorry. William. William.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Oh, God.
Thank you very much.
William, we love you. Love you.
Then on the Royal train, with the Royal family, with Charles and Harry and William, to Northampton. And we arrived and had lunch with Earl Spencer in the dining room. Someone came in and whispered into Charles Spencer's ear. He got up. Diana's arrived, everybody. So we all got up into the hallway, and the Princess's coffin had just arrived at the front door. They lifted her high and took her on its procession towards the island. They built a small pontoon across to the lake. So we all followed across the bridge to a small clearing where a hole had been dug. The soldiers lowered the coffin. So Prince Charles and William and Harry and the family left the island and left me standing there. And I was the last one, with the sunlight coming through the trees. I looked down into the hole, and there's a metal plate. It didn't say Her Royal Highness, the Princess of Wales. It said Diana, Princess of Wales. I thought, why couldn't they, in the last moment, have given her back her title? It wouldn't have hurt anyone. So I picked up some earth and threw it into the hole. And that's where my life was. And I can remember begging her, saying, "Why didn't you take me with you?" She made a difference to people's lives every single day of her life. She made a difference. Who do you know that does that? That's a sign of a great woman. That's a sign of an icon of our times. I knew her. I stood beside her. I could feel the warmth which she radiated because she was truly inspirational and unique. I stayed at Kensington Palace after the princess's death to really catalogue her estate. I stayed to pack up her home until everything had gone. But during that time, it was a very cathartic time for me to be still in Diana's domain. I used to wander around the apartments and I could hear her. I could hear her at the piano. I could hear her giggle. I could smell her. And sometimes I'd find myself asleep in her dressing room, in her smallest room. I could smell her. Her clothes were still there. Everything was in its place. It was as if she'd just stepped out the room. So for me, I couldn't leave it behind. I had a message from St. James's Palace. The Prince of Wales wants your key to the apartment. I suppose I was arrogant in those days. I was in grief. And my reply was, "You'll have to come and prize it from my dead hand." Rude. In grief. I couldn't think of any other way of going forward than to stay there. So I packed up her world and said goodbye to apartments 8 and 9, empty. All the walls were stripped of their silk hangings. All the carpets were ripped up, every light fixture taken down. There was no memory of Diana in that apartment. Her memory was erased. They didn't want anyone going back there to remember Diana.